Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Monday, May 4th. Last night I read a couple comments about, people who are upset about my opinion or my, whatever my take, whatever you want to call these things I do here, about why Jesus would, why you would be okay with Jesus suffering and dying for your sins. Like, just why you never think about stuff like that, which I talk about extensively. It's like 45 minutes. I was going to put it in the beginning of the video, but I'm going to put it at the end of the video. And I often find, how it's really funny that people get this upset by my opinion, right? Like, because I don't care about my beliefs. I don't care about any of it because I know that we all have a distorted lens in which we see the world. You know, even if we were whatever we are, like highest developed spiritual person, you have your upbringing, right? You have a lens that's influenced by your culture. And what we're dealing with here, all of us, is a distorted lens. Like, we got a distorted lens where we viewed America a certain way, and we viewed, our life here in America a certain way. And, whether you grew up in a Republican family and you rebelled against that, or you grew up in a Democratic family, you rebelled against that, or, whatever you are politically, whatever you are, you grew up as a Christian, whatever you are as a person, you've been lied to pretty much by everything and everybody. And the people believe the lies, so it's even worse. Like, they totally believe them, so they're believable. They're authentic, so they seem real. And when you're a kid, you don't know any better, and you don't question things like, you don't have the capacity. By the time you're like, even to your 8, 9, 10 years old, you're just absorbing things, and whatever you're told by your teacher and your parents and the TV and the internet now and all the rest of it, you believe is reality. And so, what the truth community is supposed to be about is undistorting and purifying and correcting your indoctrination and your, whatever, the lens. And the reason people listen to me here, or the reason that I have something to offer, is because of, I have some natural abilities, like to being dyslexic, past life stuff. I see the world in a different way. I never bought into it. There's a level of detachment I've always had. I don't really, I'm not addicted to anything. I'm not, like whatever. I don't. I just a lot of my life is just killing time, right? It's just, there's an element where I understand that the spiritual life is better, right? I enjoy my life, and you should enjoy your life. You should be grateful, enjoy it, and there's a sensory stimulation here, beautiful planet. The stimulation of the senses, but there's pleasure and happiness, and there's interesting things, and there's many wonderful things about being in a physical body, but it's not nearly as good as it is being a pure spirit. Like, in terms of, when I started to meditate, I realized there's times where I realize how heavy my body is. Like, I'm lugging around this body, and like, not just heavy in the sense of physical heaviness, but in terms of the burden you have to deal with, the food and all the other things, like all the stuff you have to do to deal with your body, right? When I first started to meditate, I realized that, like, just there's almost a physical weight to it. When I first got married, I went to New Mexico, and I had a Toyota Tercel, and I was working in a treatment center, and I was going to New Mexico, and I was putting my car in storage, and I was going to India for like 6 weeks, 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks. I drove across country from Massachusetts to New Mexico, so basically the whole country. And from the northern, one of the almost the northernmost corner of America, there's a few small states above Massachusetts, right? Like New Hampshire and Maine, and then you got Canada, all the way to New Mexico, which is almost the farthest, almost all the way down to the farthest southwestern part of the country, like across the country. It was like a 4-day drive, and I had 5 days or so to figure out, how to store my car, and I stored my car in a storage facility, and everything I owned was in this Toyota Tercel. And then over the next couple of years, when I got back from India, I met my first wife, and then she had a couple kids, and then we had a couple kids there. And by the time I was leaving, so I got there in, I think, 1995 or 6. must have been 1995. And by the time I left, it was 1999, I think. And my ex was pregnant with our third child. And we had a minivan, which she was driving, and I was driving a 26-foot truck. And we were moving from New Mexico to Idaho for an internship I was going through. And I looked behind me, and I just packed the truck. The kid, I just did it by myself. So we now I had a 26-foot truck worth of stuff, and the van held probably 4 times what my Toyota Tercel had, and so that was like my life now. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and there were like 2 kids sitting with me in the truck, and there was, you know, 2 kids and a baby on the way, and a wife, and I was like, what the fuck happened, right? I thought about coming into New Mexico with a small little compact car with no fucking air conditioning, and leaving with it was like I was going to New Mexico with a car that had a white car with black interior that had no air conditioning. And, as I was leaving with this fucking massive, and I could feel the weight. Like I almost had like a panic attack, just the weight of, the material stuff that I needed to survive. I was always kind of a minimalist, right? But anyway, like to do with my ex and to do with all these kind of things. The truth about her, like I wouldn't know stuff until for another 20 years or whatever it was, 18 years or so, whatever amount of time it was, 12, 16 years after that. Where you can't either accept the truth or know the truth because your situation, right? Like there's times where if you had to go back and live with your family, let's say they have these movies where people go back in time and become 17 again or whatever it is, right? This weird thing that people want to go back and redo high school, which is like intolerable. But can you imagine as an adult sitting through boring ass classes with boring ass fucking teenagers, and you can't, like it's intolerable. Or living with your parents again as a kid, after you've been making your own decisions, and you see things now that you couldn't see then. If you saw them then, it would have made your life miserable. Like if you come online too early, as a child, as a kid, your life is miserable because a lot of it's just eating shit as a kid, and like going through life and like ignoring things that if you were an adult you would totally call people out on, or just whatever, like it would be miserable. So you have to just be almost in a stupor or daze. Like you get into a condition where you just trudge along because schools are like look very similar to prisons. And now with all the locked in security that you have to go through to get into most of these schools, and all the bullshit that that's happened because of these bullshit things that they've done. And as a kid, you have to tolerate things that you can't tolerate as an adult, right? Because you wake up, and like there's things that jobs that you had, and things where now you're conscious in a way as a truther, as a person, that you can do the same things, right? You can only do them for a certain time. You can't go back and redo those things because you're a different person. Like you're more way, you're more of a, you can see things because you're getting rid of some of the distortion in your lens. And if there's some value here, it's that. It's like, and the people who are talking to you, they have to have kind of a less distorted lens than you. Like they have to be more, they're able to see the truth, in its unadulterated form, right? I've talked about this, that Krishna and Arjuna are a part of Vishnu's soul. Vishnu is the being in charge of preservation in the universe. It's a temporary position too. Like a new soul eventually will take that position, and Vishnu will go to some higher work, right? His soul. Like that's how the universe works, which you won't get in Christianity and some of these things, and you won't even get that in Hinduism, the religion. Even though that this kind of definition, there's creation, destruction, and preservation. There are 3 things that need to exist, and there has to be a soul in charge of all that. There has to be a soul in charge of the sun. There has to be consciousness, right? People want to think about, that there's consciousness, that there's God, Well, really, it's higher developed souls doing work for God. And they're in charge of, you know, I mean, physical things on life. There's a soul in charge of the weather, these things, right? There's a soul in charge of death, that idea of the Grim Reaper or Yama in the Hindu tradition, right? So there's these things. And people, who do the religions, they don't get all that. Like they get remedial stuff, right? And I'm going to talk about that more at the end of the video. But, the soul that's Krishna is Vishnu comes down and usually comes down with a person that is his soul and a person that's his ego, which is an interesting thing. And his soul is always teaching his ego stuff, right? In the Mahabharata, Krishna is his soul, and Arjuna is his ego. And Arjuna was like the best archer on the hero's side. When Archer could be a metaphor for, I mean, it's almost like there's spaceships and shit in there, and they've dumped it down for people. But whatever it is, and he has to kill his beloved teacher. He has to kill his, and these are people who lived much longer. They lived hundreds of years, and he has to kill like beloved relatives because it's a divided family, and there's some good heroes on the side of the villains, right? And he has to kill all these people who he loves, and he starts weeping, and he can't fucking do it. So Krishna shows him his unadulterated spiritual self. So Arjuna's looking at his own soul, and he's so fucking terrified of what he's seeing. He says, I'll kill anybody you fucking want. Just don't ever show me that again, right? Your ego is so terrified of seeing your soul, like that's a metaphor for this. What you really are and everything that you've done, like you can't even imagine your whole existence, right? Like even this one's overwhelming. This one life. Why people are not aware of their past lives and these types of things, right? But seeing the truth, beyond time, the infinite truth of your existence and what God is, would freak everybody the fuck out. Like they couldn't handle it. Like they couldn't handle God and God's unadulterated form. You got to sort of, work your way up and piecemeal, get a little bit here, get a little bit here as you expand your consciousness and understand, the reality of, what true reality is. And so, and then there's the lies and the distortions that everybody gets indoctrinated with on planet Earth. And one of the reasons that people come to watch these videos, whether they want to admit it or not, is because my lens is less distorted than yours is, the majority of people, for whatever reason, past lives. Certainly the meditation is the number one thing, the Sajmarg meditation, because there's just a cleaning process. I've been spiritually clean for 30 some odd years now, and I have always have felt a sense of detachment. I like I'm not really into planet Earth like most people are. And so I'm not really, I don't have like a dog in the fight. Like I don't care about, it's very easy for me to not care about Republicans and Democrats, to understand the left-right paradigm. I don't have attachment to either side. Like there's, points and talking points, but it's all bullshit anyway. It was easy for me to understand it. And so it's easy for me to, give an honest opinion about the Democrats and the Republicans. And, I mean, even like the thing that I cared about the most, the Sajmark system, almost, I would say 90% of the people are not willing to see what a piece of shit Dodgy is, or if they are, they're not willing to, I mean, they're in denial in some capacity, right? And these are all spiritual people who meditate, many of them, I would say, much more evolved than me spiritually, nicer people, more committed to working for God, but they can't do this. They can't, they couldn't deal with this thing. Like I'm dealing with this thing much more effectively than they are. So like I just have, like I said, I don't care about it. Like I don't care about my beliefs, and realizing that my beliefs are going to change constantly. So why should I lock into any of them? As I move forward on my spiritual journey, things that I thought were important or true turn out not to be true. Like I was, because you're on a different level. Or, they might be partially true. There's now a deeper truth. As you move forward spiritually, there's a deeper truth, right? And, there's nothing like, I'm not ever going to think I'm a knower. Like I know, it's just that, what I know today might be more than you know, right? Or whatever. my understanding of reality, my understanding of what's going on. But I mean, eventually my brain's going to start to rot. My brain's going to start to, I mean, I'm going to get older, and I'm not going to, my brother. I was talking to my brother, and he would tell me the same story 3 times in a conversation. Right? There'll be a time where, that. So that's not so far off. My brother's like 17 years older than me, and that was 5 years ago. So you do the math. I mean, there's going to be a time where, I mean, I might be wiser or whatever it is. I'll be, closer to your death, where you're moving towards the spiritual realm. But there's, I mean, people start hallucinating, whatever it is. They start, their brain just doesn't work as well. Like, and that's, I'm already happening with me. I'm starting to forget things. These things. This just happens. So, this is a limited time type of situation where I don't have all the youthful energy and the youthful mistakes and all the dumb, being a dummy and being a dumb fuck and being all these things that you go through as a kid and as a teenager, a young adult, and then finally you figure things out, and then your body starts betraying you, your mind, and these things. So it's not like none of these things are important. Like being right, being prophetic, like I mean, people remember when they used to say Trump was right about everything. No one's saying that any fucking more, right? Like no one's saying that. I mean, there's still these dumb fuck Trumpers. I saw a video somebody sent me or popped up where there's a bunch of dumb fuck Trumpers in line waiting to see Trump wearing all the Trump gear. And I hope it was a while back, but I think it was fairly recent. At least that's what they were trying to say. It was a Trump event where he was talking, maybe one of these recent things. But people aren't saying Trump was always right. Marjorie Taylor Greene used to say that, right? But these people who think that they're always right, it was because there was a Democratic president, and you could be right about that. Just like the Democrats could be right about Trump now, but they're not right because they're skewed, they're prejudiced, their lens is distorted, and they haven't dealt with the distortion of the political left-right paradigm, for example. And so, people have watched my videos know that I've been right about everything. I mean, in a way, in the capacity that I could be. There's things that just I don't know or don't have the ability to know or is being prevented to know. And, I have come with my own distortion, even as someone as detached as I've been, in terms of I never really bought into American system. And, I don't have dogs in these fights and I don't really care about it, right? I can root for a team, and like the team loses, it's like, whatever. I can watch a sport and I can get into it for a little bit, but it's no big deal. I don't get upset. Like I can pick a team, and one team's going to win, one team's going to lose. But it's whatever. Like I'm not, I can see when the refs are on one side or the other. Like I can tell which team's getting the calls and which team that they want to win, the powers that be. And just objectively, like not because when you see fans. They see a call go against them and they boo when they see the replay, but then when they see the incorrect call go in their favor, they're not like, hey, look, this is unfair, why don't you give the other team give the other team the call. They never say that, right? Because people get subjective. They think it's okay for their team to cheat, but they get upset when the other team does the same thing, right? It's subjective, right? They want the refs to actually skew the game in their favor. They literally want to do. They want to see they want cheating on their side, right? Because the people are subjective. But so so this is why I don't care about my own beliefs, because my own beliefs don't mean anything. Your beliefs don't mean anything. Like they mean something to your your evolution in your own personal life, but like people war and argue about their beliefs. I'm not here to convince people, and so. I just am like an oracle that, just gives my opinion, objectively as I can. I'm more objective than most people. People think miracles are such a great thing. Christians do. But there's something, when you're on your spiritual journey, you can manipulate reality at the first rung of spirituality. In the Sajmark system, there's lots of people on the first rung, and they are prohibited from doing miracles. Like you can't do them, like it's blocked, but you have access to them. It's just blocked, right? Because like they're not good things to do. Because once you have that ability, you start doing things going against God's plan. Because you get subjective, and Jesus did some of these things. Some of his miracles were him just showing off, right? So you know, because I mean, he was young. He was a young person, and in his 30s, late 20s. So I mean, it's having the capacity to change materiality is not such a good thing, right? And so people think being a prophet is really some incredible thing, but you just have to, go through some spiritual training, and you're going to start seeing things, and you're going to see patterns, and you're going to, be able to predict things one way or another. You're going to be connected to God. God's going to show you things, and you're going to be able to see the truth in ways that other people can't. And people are going to look at you like you're something great, but you're not. And so, like me being right or being prophetic, and it's just it comes with just doing years and years of spiritual practice, and that's why people come to listen to me, whether they agree with everything or not, or they have their things that will align, but they're so tight in their beliefs they get upset. Like these Christians are getting upset with me. Usually here in the comments, I covered two of the comments in my last video, and a couple comments in this one about me saying, why would you want to die why would you want someone else to die and suffer for your sins? Why would you want to relinquish responsibility for your sins? Which is clearly the deal that you're getting in Christianity. And they're lying about it. They're upset. And, what I want to say about all that is I don't want the responsibility of people coming to me and, watching these videos and, making decisions or doing your thinking for you or doing your spirituality for you even more so. Like, just ask God. Like, if you're a Christian, ask Jesus. And I used to say this all the time to people. Just ask Jesus if what I'm saying is true. Like, get some way of validating what I'm saying, right? Because people there's people who wanted to call me master, because of the Sajmark meditation stuff. And I'm like, no, like, you might want me to be your master, but who says I want you to be my disciple? Like, I know the responsibility that's there for these things, from, whatever. And I've talked about this. And, I don't want the responsibility I'm not making, I'm just putting out information. I expect you to do your thinking for yourself and your decisions for yourself, right? Like, I'm not like other people that's, like telling people what to do. I don't want to tell people what to do or what to think. Like, I just say the stuff that I believe to be the truth. Very, as being with whatever level of my, my own distorted lens or what God allows me to see at this particular time in my life. And, like everyone else everyone listening should find some way to validate what I'm saying, right? That's why I say I don't give advice. I'm not telling people what to do. I say this over and over again for lots of different reasons, but the main one is your fucking responsibility, right? And so that when you're a person who realizes that I have something going on here that, is valuable, which I'll talk about in this, voiceover at the end, and you're a Christian and I say things that go against your Christian indoctrination, then ask Jesus. Like, you have an authority, which is Jesus. Ask Jesus' soul, find a way to communicate with Jesus and ask him. Ask him if I'm right. Like, you don't have to like leave a nasty comment or I don't give a shit, right? I say things and then let them go. I literally don't think about things, unless I talk about it in successive videos because people leave comments. But, I have an opinion about something or I have a belief or whatever it is that I share. And again, I don't even care about my own beliefs because they change. Like, this is a new thing. It's a new revelation for me about how it's kind of fucked up that Christians believe it's okay to dump their sins on somebody else, right? I mean, are okay with that. Like, that he suffers for your sins, right? Every spiritual master is going to suffer a little bit for their disciples. Sajmark system, it's the cleaning system, but it's different, right? There's a process and a system, and it's okay. Like it's not you should feel bad that you're being a burden to your master. You should feel bad that you're, when people would go and see one of the masters in Sajmark and they would get completely cleaned, right? Like there's a story where the third master, Charji, Babaji, his master was still alive, and Charji was going to be his successor. And Charji lived in like what would be like Florida, and Babaji lived in like what would be, I don't know, like Michigan or something like that. Some northern place in the northern part of India. And there's some European hippie kids who were going from Michigan to Florida on a train, to see Chargy. And they got there, and Chargy gave one of them these meditations, and he read their condition, and they were completely gross. And he said, "What do you guys do?" And they said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, when you left Babaji, you would have been pristine. Your spiritual condition would have been as clean as it could be. Like he would have cleaned everything he could at this particular level. There's a limit to how much you can be cleaned based on where you are, and then more stuff emerges later on, right? But they would have been, glowing inside, like just pure and clean. And he saw that there was a lot of grossness. And they said, "Well, we smoked hash on the way down here. The marijuana, there's a flower, hashish." And he was like, "Yeah, don't do that anymore." And they were like, "No, Babaji said only forbidden, forbidden." He goes, "Yeah, no, you're messing up your spiritual condition." But you would go see the master of the system, or you go to a gathering, and you would get cleaned out. And then you'd go back in your life, and you would indulge, and you would accumulate more grossness, and the master would have to clean you again. And he was using his life force and his energy. So at some point you start feeling bad, right? You should start feeling bad, and you would have to be more disciplined in your life. And you would have to, there's various tools you could use to practice constant remembrance and things, to help you not accumulate more grossness, right? And you would, you'd have to be less, more disciplined about your habits and, things that you saw that would, or participate in, or thoughts that you would have. And it was, it's a system, and like anything else, because you didn't want to be a burden. And that's where some of that, take that I had was coming from, because I understood this in my own spiritual journey. You don't want to be a burden for somebody else, right? You want to stand on your own 2 feet. You want to be some worthless sinner. You want to, be somebody who can contribute. Like, when my kids first started to homestead, and they were milking cows, and they felt like, they were doing chores around the farm, and they felt like they were contributing. They were bringing in food. They were helping. I saw how great it was for them, with all the, bullshit my family, went through, all the difficulties with my ex, all that stuff. But there was things they got, that were self-esteem, like not the way that people talk about self-esteem now. But in terms of all this, again, this is supposed to be a short introduction. You can ask God about it. Like, you should ask God. Like this, don't take my word for it. And I don't want people to take my word for it, because, like, who wants that responsibility? Ask God. Like, find a way to ask God. You can pray to God at night, and, either through dreams or whatever, God will communicate back to you. Like, there's ways to communicate with God. Like, figure out, like, pray to God and say, how can I start having a dialogue with you? How can I start getting information from you? Like, that's what I do here. That's why I'm right all the time, because I actively connect with God, and it's the proof is in the pudding. All right, so let's get into the other stuff here, and you'll hear the voiceover about this later on. Okay, so I already got a shit ton of voiceovers. I did one last night. I did one this morning, one this morning, and one this afternoon. Mostly about the same subject, to do with this thing about Jesus and dying for his sins, and then a lot of other stuff to go with it. It's funny how Trump, is almost trying to pretend the Iran war isn't happening. Like, he's just, it's like, he's playing hooky from the Iran war. So here, I forget what the theme of this video is. I wrote down the title here because I guess it was based on the voiceover, which I already forgot about. Oh yeah, if Trump was right, it went from Trump was right about everything to Trump lied about everything. And so this is, fits right in with that.
Iran's state media now claims that that country's Navy has prevented the U.S. military and U.S. military ships from entering the Strait of Hormuz. This is just as President Trump, as I mentioned, says that American forces will begin guiding ships through that very same strait. A note here, a U.S. official tells CNN that guiding is not the same thing as escorting, as has long been discussed and not implemented, which, yes, raises a whole host of questions about how this actually works now. And so...
Okay, so if they're not escorting them through, then Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz. America, whatever Iran's saying or not, whether that's believable or not, what's believable is that they're not escorting the ships through. Because would you rather be guided or escorted by a warship? Like if a warship's saying, well, we'll guide you through, but we're not going in there. Well, were you crazy? We're not going in there, right? So that means, I just covered yesterday Trump saying that they shot down some kind of, they blew out the engine in a ship and then went in and took all the oil and said, well, we're kind of like pirates now. And yet, there's this.
Far shipping data shows almost no traffic is moving there still. On this announcement from Trump, Iran responded by publishing a new map of the strait. The red lines that you see right there, those are the boundaries of the expanded zone that Iran now claims it controls, and warns that, well, the quote is, any foreign military force will be attacked if they try to approach or enter the key oil route. Overnight gas prices ticked up about a penny, but the national average, remember we've been tracking over time, has jumped 35 cents in just a week to $4.46 a gallon. Let's go to CNN's Kevin Liptag. He's live this morning for
Liptag
us at the White House to start us off. What are you hearing about all this? There seems to be quite a bit happening as we speak.
Right. And I'll start with some of those claims that we've seen in Iranian state media over the last hour. I've been talking to officials. No one had heard that an American ship had been struck, which was one of the claims that you heard from one of the Iranian state media sources. Now Central Command, just in the last few seconds, coming out with a statement denying this, saying that no U.S. Navy ships have been struck. U.S. forces are supporting Project Freedom and enforcing the naval blockade on Iranian ports. So trying to clear up at least one of the pieces of information that's out there as the president tries to get traffic flowing again through this critical waterway. In the past, the Iranians have claimed to have struck American vessels.
All right, so you get the idea. Trump is fucked. He doesn't have a solution to the Strait of Hormuz. They've done nothing. He keeps on saying, we're getting close to reaching a deal with a government he says it doesn't exist. And they're trying to scrape one together. But he's going to get a deal with that new government. And he's sure that the deal's going to last forever. Forever, ever? Forever, ever.
Feel like this forever, 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 ever, forever, ever.
All right, so he's back at it here.
We do have some more breaking news related to the Iran war. This is by Fox News right here, saying breaking, Trump speaking with Fox News' Trey Yingst threatens that Iran will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth if the Islamic Republic attacks U.S. ships guiding vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. So that is some new developments as we continue to track all of the breaking news.
So you're going to fucking drop a nuclear bomb on them? Like all the innocent people there, the fucking 100 million people, you're just going to fucking wipe out the whole fucking country? And, the radiation fallout to all your allies, you think they're not going to be fucked? Like, Israel particularly, but then all these other, other allies that are there. I mean, even that might even be closer to Iran in different places. So what does that mean? That means, or you're going to use conventional bombs and you're not going to bomb the whole fucking country. There's only one way to blow it off the face of the earth, and that's with nuclear weapons. Like, he's just all over the place. 2 days ago, he declared that the war was over to Congress. And now this, right? All right, here it is. It's already fucking happening. It's just a couple hours later.
The U.S. and Iran trading shots in the Gulf, threatening an already fragile ceasefire. Today, the U.S. military says it blew up 6 Iranian small boats in the Strait of Hormuz after Iran launched, quote, multiple cruise missiles, drones, and small boats at U.S. Navy ships and commercial vessels. The exchange of fire happening just hours after President Trump announced that the U.S. will begin helping guide stranded ships out of the strait. Meantime, the UAE is accusing Iran of renewed missile and drone attacks, the first since early April, including a drone strike on an Emirati oil port, causing a large fire and injuring 3 people there, according to officials. Let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes at the White House right now. So, Kristen, what is the administration saying as tensions with Iran appear to be escalating?
It's not just the tensions that are escalating, Boris. We're also hearing it in President Trump's rhetoric. He just did a brief phone interview with Fox in which he said essentially that if the Iranians target U.S. ships in the area, that they will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth. Now, during this interview, he also said that the Iranians were more malleable now, that he did believe that there could be...
So it's like already unraveling. It's already, I mean, it unraveled before. Like he's just walking around bullshitting, and I mean, you can't do this for like ever, right? You went up to Congress, hey, you guys, the war's over, you guys, like, yeah, now you have to, you can't like cut off my funding, and then 2 days later they're exchanging missiles, and he's threatened basically a nuclear strike. So he's at a small business summit while he slowly, all of his policies and all the things he's doing is crushing all small businesses. He's totally against small business owners, which is like, it's just facts. I don't know when this happened, when this particular question and answer thing happened in relation to what just is happening in the Strait of the Hormuz.
So let me begin by saying congratulations to the small business people of the year from all 50 states.
Okay, let's move forward here.
The whole country, and this country is leading the whole. We're truly making America great again. We're doing record business. We have a stock market that hit even with this military operation. Call it whatever you want.
Excursion. I like to call it an excursion. Oh no, that's you, fuckhead. Right?
Can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
You can't. Just fucking can't do it. I mean, you can't. You guys like fucking can't do that. Like, we think you can fucking do that? You can't fucking do that.
We hit all new highs, and I said we have to take care of business because we can't let that happen.
Can't let that happen. It ain't fucking happen. It's gonna happen if it ain't fucking happen.
We did a little detour,
Little detour, everything for detour.
and it's working out very nicely.
Nicely, not fucking nicely.
They have no navy.
They have no navy. They have fucking navy. They have fucking nuclear weapon. They have fucking navy.
Air Force.
No Air Force. Fucking Air Force. They don't have fucking Air Force.
Anti-aircraft equipment.
No anti-aircraft equipment. Fucking equipment.
They have no radar. They have no.
No radar. Fucking radar. It's radar. Fucking mash. Radar. Fucking rash.
They have no leaders. Actually,
They have leaders. They have fucking. There's no people. We killed all fucking people.
the leaders happen to be gone also.
No, the leaders haven't even gone. We're trying to make a deal with the children over there. There's no adults. We fucking killed all the adults.
But can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
You can't let those fucking kids have a nuclear weapon. Fucking, they're just kids.
You're gonna have
And they hate the Jews over there. The fucking kids.
problems like nobody would believe, and it's going very well.
You're gonna fucking buy it. It's like better.
We're also pleased to be joined this afternoon by Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, who's been.
All right. So Jesus Christ, he just says the same bullshit over and over again. The lies that you repeat and repeat until they become, what the fucking, what people think of as facts, right? Anyways, not. I mean, obviously, with Trump, it's not ever going to be that, but just repeating the fucking lies. So I guess this is the official White House Twitter page, and they posted a truth from Donald J. Trump. I have all the cards. I guess he doesn't understand the rules of Uno, right? He doesn't understand you're supposed to get rid of your cards. Holy shit, someone said that Iran just posted this. Okay. Fucking Donnie in a diaper and just, Pete X just drunk and throwing up. Holy shit. All right. I don't know. Let's go to the end and see if there's anything. I guess he falls off here. All right. Taking full advantage of AI technology. They've already making memes about this shit. He has all the cards, bankruptcy. 5 bankruptcy cards. Now this is a quality meme, a fucking fat ass blind Trump blinded by the Israeli flag, leaving his dumb MAGA dumb fuck sheep over the cliff. I mean, just well done. You've been lured. The kid from Mask. So the caption to this was, "We have less cards." All these points. These plus fours, these are like better cards to have if you're in Uno, better than the wild card. Because every one of these cards will cause Trump to pick up more cards, and this guy will end up winning. So this happened.
I said, so what do you think, Ronnie? They call me a genius who's going to destroy the country. Then they said, he's a genius who's taken over the entire world. Then they said, he's a total moron. This guy is so stupid. And then, so whenever I hear that one, I say, let's take the cognitive test. But
So every time someone calls you a moron, you take a cognitive test? Right? You know, a cognitive test is to see if you're senile or not. It's not to see if you're a moron or not. Which, you know, I mean, if that's how easily you're influenced by people criticizing you. Oh, they said it a moron? Well, I'm going to take a cognitive test. Kind of proves that you're a moron. So here's a self-explanatory meme. Okay, Tuesday, May 5th today, Cinco de Mayo. So here we go. I had another heart thing yesterday. I talked a little bit at the end of the video on my voiceover. Much more relaxed about it this time. Like there wasn't any panic on my part, but just, you know, whatever. A little bit of a setback on the way physically, but I feel like there's things that I've benefited from these things. You know, it'd be great if they stopped, but, you know, I feel like there's been benefit to my meditations and then, you know, to my physical system. I've lost 20 pounds and, you know, there's things going on. Anyway, so, you know, not as devastating as before, but still, you know, there's a silver lining. Anyways, I'll cover that later in the video. Here's the...
Fox News Alert, Central Command has just initiated Operation Project Freedom. The mission, unblock the strait. The president says if Iran interferes, it's a death sentence.
I spoke with President Trump for 20 minutes about the situation with Iran. He talked...
Okay, it's a death sentence, right? So this was the name of the video, and Fox is covering it positively. And so they're trying to unblock the strait. And so it's going to be up to the Iranians to start sinking American vessels, which will trigger, you know, a ground war and, you know, whatever it is that Trump plans to do after that, right? So, you know, Trump is a fucking madman, and he's been threatening things like blowing Iran off the face of the earth. And so, you know, what happens if they sink one of these large, you know, I mean, I don't know if they have the capability, and if they do, you know, whatever happens here. But, you know, Trump doesn't get that they get to shoot back. Like, you know, like that seems to be not on his scorecard or his dance card. You know, we'll see what happens here. I mean, let me see if there's any news. Okay, so, you know, there's probably going to be stuff happening today. I'm going to get this video up again. I've had kind of a, you know, intense day already, and weird day yesterday. So, you know, here we go. Let's watch this fucking guy. Right?
No, the ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project, and we expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that.
Iran knows that. They know it. They know we did. It's not just me. They know it too.
And ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire.
The defense secretary also said the new U.S. push to help guide commercial vessels through the strait has proven successful. He points to 2 U.S. ships transiting the strait yesterday. 100 ships-ish per day, though, crossed the strait before this war began. Still, Secretary Hegseth says this proves, in his words, the lane is clear. CNN's Elena Treen is live at the White House for us.
All right, so, you know, like, I don't know if any of this stuff is real. Like, I don't even know if Iran exists. I mean, I do know, because I met someone from there. Wasn't an actor, right? I met multiple people from Iran, and, you know, so I guess we could say that those countries are real. They're all real, right? I've been to some of them, and I know people from others, and I flow through some, you know, these things. So, you know, But in terms of this war, like, there's no way to say this is even going on, right? Like, I don't know anybody I trust who's there that I can talk to, right? You know, I have some friends on Facebook, but I don't, people don't use Facebook anymore, and I don't, not, hey, how you doing? You guys, are we at war with you guys? It'd be whatever it was. I did reach out to that one guy, see how he was, but he never responded. The person I know best from Iran. Thought there was a tick on the bed, but it's not. Anyways, all right, so in all that, this Strait of Hormuz, if this is real, or even just as part of the show, that's where the conflict is. And up until this point, Trump has not felt like they could go into the Strait of Hormuz and open it up. And now they seem to be indicating they are. So it's either going to happen or it isn't. And this is either going to escalate from there or it's not, right? Like, Iran is going to have a choice if America starts, escorting ships through and saying, we're going to control the strait. And if Iran can do anything to those ships, then the war is going to escalate. If they don't do anything, then what happens then? Then the really kind of war is over. So all of those things. So let's see what happens here. I'll look to see if there's any other things now. I'm going to wrap this video up and get it done here. So the UAE vows harsh revenge on Iran after new strikes. So who the fuck knows what's going on? So again, we're going to see what happens with the strait. And it may happen today. It may happen, whatever. I mean, I'll make my next video. It might go up early, and then I'll take another day. We'll see what happens. If something big happens, this video is going up at 9 tonight, and then tomorrow, usually I'll take a day off and whatever. But here, not take a day off. Take a day off from posting. I'll still be making content in my next video.
And Zaman, what's the latest with this new round of strikes?
So we're just getting within the last hour or so, Anna, that the UAE's Ministry of Defense are intercepting or trying to intercept a barrage of Iranian missiles and drones coming into the country for a second day in a row now. We're not exactly...
Maybe you guys should get yourself an Iron Dome.
Exactly sure where the target is, which city or town Iran is specifically trying to target, whether the UAE is managing to intercept these missiles and drones before they land on UAE territory. But there's clearly, once again, military action taking place for a second day in a row. This was after yesterday. The UAE said they intercepted 15 missiles and 4 drones fired from Iran. This was the first time that Iran had attacked the UAE since the ceasefire started.
Okay, so, doesn't sound like a ceasefire. And they're saying they want harsh revenge. Not just revenge, harsh revenge. So there's all that shit. I don't know. Netanyahu still hasn't been seen. Like, he hasn't come to America. He hasn't been somewhere where, maybe he's still alive. I mean, that rumor kind of died down. But we haven't seen him. So he seems to either be in hiding or... He's definitely in hiding or, something's happened to him or whatever. There's a lot of unanswered questions. And, like, Trump's just a liar and his administration's a liar and the media sucks and, the whole thing. But at some point there's going to be, I think, an inevitable escalation. And so, here, let's wrap this one up here. I'm going to edit these. I don't think there's anything else here. I'll look at Twitter. See if there's anything there, but there's just rumors and fucking gossip and shit. So I mean, there's no real information out there, but eventually they'll be like, all right, this is going to go one way or another, and I think it just can't go in a good way. Like, I just don't foresee that happening. All right, so I got something from Hegseth here. So there's an airplane that apparently was going over to Iran and then did a couple of circles and then went fucking crazy and bullshit and headed back to Qatar. That was an American plane. This is just, unconfirmed bullshit. Here is allegedly a UAE ship on fire after being struck near the Strait of Hormuz. Pete Hegseth, Iran is embarrassed. They said they control... Here, let's just listen to this.
2 U.S. commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have already safely transited the strait, showing the lane is clear. We know the Iranians are embarrassed by this fact. They said they control the strait. They do not. So American ships led the way, commercial and military, shouldering the initial risk from the front, as Americans always do.
he's so fucky. He sucks so bad. So, you know, none of these people are believable. There's this little dweeb who's always arguing with these people. U.S. Navy just crushed Iran's Mosquito fleet and unlocked the Strait of Hormuz. Jesse Walter, blown off the face of the earth. He's all psyched about that. I mean, do you think Iran is embarrassed? Like, this is, a crisis for them. I mean, like, they're in much worse shape than other people. So there's things here on both sides, and America's, Trump's always going to claim victory, right? Trump deny, deflect, attack, and whatever it is, always claim victory. So, that's what Trump does. So here we are, like this. That's some weird shit there. So, I guess they're saying that they're using some sort of some kind of way to disrupt the radar, disrupt the, to make the plane do all that shit, right? So, who's to say? And we'll see how this all plays out in the next couple of years, I guess. All right, so I'm going to wrap this video up here. If there's anything that like some big thing that happens, I may, add it to the video, maybe in the beginning. We'll see. I don't think that's going to happen. But there are going to be all these things until something real happens. And, there's something that everyone agrees, all right, this has just happened. Like if America drops an atomic weapon on or Israel does on Iran, I think that'll be pretty much all right. Everyone agrees that happened. Iran and the rest, whatever. So, but a lot of this stuff is both sides claiming victory and propaganda and, who the fuck knows what really happened. All right, so that's it for now. Here are the voiceovers. Okay, so I had kind of a weird experience. Couple of them. I had a weird last night, and I've been using DMSO, not recommending it, not suggesting it, and I've been using it in a certain way that it would cause me to get lightheaded. And I didn't know if that had something to do with the thing that happened with my heart or something like that, but I use the thing that the system, and I'm not going to tell people what it is because I'm not sure it's something people should be doing, so I don't even want to put it out there. And I use the what I use to administer the DMSO without the DMSO, and I started getting lightheaded again, and I didn't know if the some had left. It evaporates. I don't even know. So it was kind of weird. But I was in bed, very lightheaded, feeling whatever. And there's a comment I'm about to play you. That was the last thing I did really before bed. Like I watched some TV, but it was something that came up because I was meditating because I was kind of feeling lightheaded and I didn't want to go to sleep like that. It ended up being fine. And then I got another story of something fucked up that just happened to me, or something I witnessed that, still kind of stinging a little bit. So, this comment the person left, there were some thoughts I had about it. And, the part of it was the person was trying to mock me for sharing personal information here, right? And, and I addressed that in the comment, my response to the comment, so I'm not going to get into that here. One thing I didn't say is, this is my support system. I have my wife and the people here. Like, I just share everything. And it humanizes me because, when I share personal details, like I'm a very private person. I'm introverted. It's easier for me to talk here on the microphone than it would be talking to strangers or whatever it is. And it humanizes me because I could come off as cold and aloof and, like kind of a prick, like these things, it makes me, it shows some of my softer side or whatever it is, right? An example of this, so I'm driving, and if my wife's listening, she should probably stop listening for like 2 to 3 minutes because I already told her I didn't want her to hear this thing. And if you're squeamish about animals getting killed on a road, then you should fast forward a couple minutes and just listen to my, what I say afterwards maybe about it. But I was driving to Whole Foods, and my headache came back, I'm going to talk about the headache in the voiceover coming up. But my headache came back, and now it's gone. It's kind of whatever. It's a whole thing. And I'm driving to go shopping at a couple stores, and I see that there's something heading towards the car in front of me, and I realize it seems to be like birds that are going into it's like, and I'm like, well, I don't understand. And then I'm like, oh my God, those are baby duck and fucking ducks. And just as I realize that, the car clears and I see a dead, squished mother duck on the road. I'm like, fuck. And the baby ducks just run the other way. And I'm like, oh my God, those ducks are fucked. These baby ducks are screwed, right? Like they're going to be eaten. There's like 10 of them or 8 of them, like a lot of them. And they're gone. And, this road's too busy and I don't have any way to grab them. And I don't even know, I mean, I can't raise baby ducks right now. And I don't know if I could catch, it's a whole thing. I'm going like 45 miles an hour and I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. And I'm thinking about how harsh nature is, right? Like, 1 minute they're a happy little family, and next thing there's, orphan ducks that are all doomed. Unless somebody grabs them and raises them, I don't know, whatever. But, it's food for another animal. I guess that's the positive of these things. But, then I thought, well, this is a man-made problem because, they're not really equipped to deal with cars, right? I mean, animals have a tough time with headlights and cars. Roadkill. I mean, the roadkill is a fucking word because, we see roadkill all the fucking time, right? And, it's a lot of different, types of animals, and they don't know how to deal with the speed and the violence of an automobile. But then I thought, but these ducks are walking around with their babies, and they're completely vulnerable, the mother ducks. I was on my tractor, and I see a turkey, and it's not moving. And I slow down, and then all of a sudden, all these baby turkeys, this is, I think, last year, the year before, and all these baby turkeys come out. And I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. And I wouldn't be able to see those baby turkeys had, the mother turkey like this close if there wasn't the babies, because they're vulnerable, right? The mother's vulnerable, they can't fly yet. And flying is what keeps birds alive, right? When they're not able to fly, then they can hide and hope the predator doesn't find them. And when they're walking around in the middle of the day and they're free from worries about predators, it's because they live in man-made areas where predators don't come out during the day. For the most part, I mean, there's some, pacification of American places where that isn't the case. And so then I'm thinking, well, if the car wasn't there, this duck would still be vulnerable, and some predator might come by and eat her, or eat our, these things, eat her kid, these things. So, and I'm thinking about how, like, things change in a fucking light, in a millisecond, right? I mean, that's how, life can change. I mean, not just for ducks, for people, for everything. Like, some things are just harsh, and they're, and death comes quickly, and, whatever. So, it's kind of a bummer. Like, it was just like, I would rather not have seen that, but, that's just the reality. There's people right now, I don't know how many people are dying every day, but there are people dying from car accidents every day. It can happen to anybody, right? So going back to this comment you're about to hear when I get done with this like little mini intro, the person is trying to rag on me for sharing personal details because he's angry and butthurt and all these things. And, I thought about a couple of these things last night. The first one is, one of the saving graces for me is I don't give a shit what people say here in terms of comments. Like, they just don't affect me. And it doesn't affect the content before I put it up, right? Before I, when I say it. And if I'm going to lose viewers, I don't care about that as well. I mean, I care about it, but I don't change what I'm going to say. Because especially, as time has gone on, I had to censor myself to some extent for YouTube community guidelines, and that sucks. But when you're censoring yourself because, people have different belief systems than you do, then, it's going to affect your content. And there's lots of people out there who are pandering to a certain demographic, like a Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and these other people. I mean, this has happened to TPUSK, right? When they're caught between pandering to their audience or pandering to their handlers, and they chose their handlers, but they've lost their audience, right? It's not because they're truth tellers. But it's refreshing for many people that I can just say what I'm going to say and not worry about the reactions. And I know the reactions are going to be there. You know, I knew there was going to be reactions to it's specifically to this comment I made about how, you know, it's fucked up that Christians are okay with Jesus dying for their sins. And, you know, they've never thought about that before. Like, yeah, this kind of fucked up. And that would cause a sort of a break in their faith, right? And so because I'm like that, this person who, you know, likes my political opinions, as he'll put in the, you know, in the comment, a person that has listened to me quite a bit, you know, my videos, and it's because I will just say what needs to be said or what I believe without, you know, worrying about how it affects anybody or any kind of reaction, right? I just tell the truth, you know, I don't manipulate people. I don't, you know, I'm not running some kind of game. I'm not, you know, I just say what comes to mind and what passes through me, and whatever I'm being a conduit for, I just let it flow through. And that's why people who inevitably get butthurt enjoy my videos, because they know it's different. They know that there's something going on here they don't see with other people. Maybe there's a few other people like this, but, you know, there's things that I know more than other people. And certainly meditating using the Sajmark method, which is, you know, the best for upward spiritual evolution, has given me an advantage in some of these other things. You know, I'm kind of a slacker, and, you know, I'm not great at a lot of things, and, you know, this, whatever it is, but in terms of the lens that I see the world through, like I said in the beginning of the video, the audio in the beginning of the video, the distortion of that lens is why people are looking for the truth, right? Because your lens has been distorted. The way that you've been prejudiced in some way, you know, just by being indoctrinated as a kid and coming into a world full of liars and lies, right? And so, you know, people who are desperately looking for some truth, you know, you can't give them a partial truth. Like people, you're just creating more lies and more indoctrination, right? You're telling them the half-truth and blaming the liberals or blaming the Jews or blaming this or blaming that. You know, when people have, you know, some easy solution or easy answer, if we just do this, you know, you're not here to fix society. You know, you're here to understand what's your true purpose, what's your true goal, what are you supposed to contribute, what's your reason for being, what's your purpose in life, right? And you would get all this here if you can accept what I understand to be the answer, which is finding divinity within, right? But it comes down to how much bullshit are you willing, you know, inner bullshit that you've been told, you've been indoctrinated with, how much of it are you willing to let go? And how much you're willing to admit that even something like your religion or, you know, whatever it might be is a part of the deception. And most people can't get there, right? And the other thing is, this person is like, you know, I really value your opinion, but I don't value his. Like, you know, these people who come in and they say, oh, I'm unsubscribing, and they, you know, say this goodbye cruel world kind of thing, and they're looking for some sympathy and somebody to say, oh man, I value you so much, you know, desperate people. Like, I don't get my self-esteem from positive comments and reactions to my video. Like, I don't even, in a sense, have self-esteem the way most people do because of the Sajmark meditation and the idea that you're always supposed to be changing. Now, part of that change is the world gets reflected back to you. Like, some of the change comes from some of the information that comes through the external world. Even the most, you know, dedicated spiritual person can't just generate change from their internal condition. They also have to see how people react to them. And so that's something. But, you know, what happens here, which, you know, the reason why I don't care about people's comments, and especially negative comments, is because it comes from an emotional butthurt place. Like this dude's comment, right? It comes from a place of weakness, and it's not about me at all. It's about them struggling with the fact that they know that I have something going on here, you know, that's not really because of me, and it's because of the meditative system, which is even worse for them, because then they don't want to accept that, they want to mock that, or they want to think their religion's better. But then why aren't you listening to Christians? Like, why aren't you listening to Christian commentators? Why is my stuff so much better here? Because I'm doing a superior spiritual system. You know, there's some talent here, then, you know, some experience, but most of it has to do with my connection to divinity. So when you have that connection with divinity, there's the change is there because divinity is constantly showing you in one way or another things you have to change. And you either do it or you don't, based on your capacity and your energy level and how much, how hard it is. But it's there to change, right? At least you're aware of it. And when you're aware of it, like when people say shit to you, it doesn't matter because like I already know like there's issues. Like I know that there's things that need to change. Like I know I'm not perfect because when you meditate, you think about the things you say, the things you do, even small things. And things get smaller and smaller as you move forward and you get more older and older. But there are things that you always need to correct, you always need to work on. And I'm not, assiduous about it. I mean, I could be better. And that's one of the things, right? Like that's one of the things I need to work on. But, like I'm kind of just worn out with the whole thing. And just all of it. The world is just a dismal place right now, and it's hard enough just to eke out a spiritual practice in a system like this. But it is what it is, right? But there's always room for improvement. And when you know that, it's not some big deal if somebody says something to you they point something out. You're like, wait, you don't think I'm perfect? Well, of course, like everyone should know they're not perfect, right? And not just say those words. This happens when my daughter committed suicide. And, I had to share that. I mean, there's no, it was a big thing. And I knew when I shared it, there were going to be people who would use it against me. There's people who are just hanging around being trolls. There's going to be a butthurt person, and they were going to say something, hurtful, that they thought would be hurtful. They're going to find, you're thinking a way it's a vulnerability, a way to, sort of, I mean, it's fucked up that people get so mad they want to silence you and censor you by trying to use your personal information that you make available to them, which could, and does benefit other people. But, I knew that there was nothing that they could say to me that was worse than my daughter committed suicide, right? Like, there's probably nothing anybody could say to me that's worse than me seeing the duck thing. Like, there's just, it's a real bummer. Like, there's just things that are just bummers and they affect you in a negative way. And, words are just words. Like, that's just something that's like, ah, fuck. Now I got this to fucking, now I got this inside me. I just saw this thing or whatever it might be. But the most important thing I want to share before this comment comes in, this person, like when someone says I'm subscribing, I'm like, yeah, good. Like, I feel relieved. Good. Like, I don't want you here anyway. But the reality is anybody who comes onto this channel and stays for some period of time, part of them wants to wake up and find divinity within them. And whether it be their religion or there are any number of reasons why it stops you from doing that, the potential's there. And most of the negative comments like the one you're about to hear come from that place where their higher nature wants them to embrace what they're hearing here, but their ego just won't let them do it. And this inner conflict, instead of realizing like it's them that's failing and they're a piece of shit, they try to blame it on me, which is, what's happened over and over again. I mean, this is why, Jesus was crucified, right? People are scared of like the good thing happening inside themselves. Like anybody who talks about connecting with divinity within you, and then there's a movement and then people can see it taking place. They're like, oh, kill that guy over there because, especially white people in the West, in America and Europe particularly, but in other places in the world as well. Oh, kill that guy over there. You have the Middle East, obviously. Kill that guy over there because, he might bring about change. And, it's like there's going to be a battle between the next evolutionary step in human evolution and the people that control the system now and the people who don't want that change to happen. And it's the majority of people. Like, human beings are going extinct now and there's going to be a new human being. It's like I'm not sure this actually happened, but it's, even if it's fictional, the difference between the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon man, right? Like one of them is, the future and the other one is about to go extinct. And the ones that are going extinct, they're doing whatever they can not to let that happen. And so that's a big part of what's going on here. And lots of people have a struggle with this because they can't rise up and embrace their higher nature. They can't be a part of the future. They have potential to do it. Not everybody has that potential, but they just can't do it. And instead of admitting their own failure, they get mad at me or whoever else, whatever it is that's causing the conflict within them. Anyways, here's the comment. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Sunday, May 3rd. I haven't actually finished the video that's going to go up tomorrow on Monday, which will go up at 2, because I had the migraine headache, which is finally seems to have gone. I always feel good afterward, like great, like I have more serotonin than normal after the headache goes away. And so I read a few comments that people were leaving about my comment about why would you be okay with someone else suffering and dying for your sins, bearing the burden of your sins, right? Why would you want to relinquish the responsibility for your mistakes to somebody else, and somebody that you profess to love like Jesus, right? Legitimate question, like just something to think about. You have things in your society, you have things that you grew up with in your family, and you don't know they're weird until you go out into the world, right? Like you don't know they're fucked up, right? There's things that your family does that, and maybe cultures, rituals people do in different cultures around the world, and they just do it, right? There's a couple of tribes in New Guinea, the islands off of Australia. There's these tribes that live out there, and one of the tribes believes that puberty happens for men, for young men, when they ingest semen orally or anally. Like the other tribe, it's anally. Like it's like there's fucked up weird shit like that, rituals that people do. I mean, we hear it all the time, things that makes no sense, things that are, that are just weird. And there are things that people start doing, the dancing around like with rattlesnakes as a way to celebrate their Christianity, right? They take some sentence out of the Bible. There's people in India that dress like they have masks. There's also a certain group of transgender people in India, men dressing up as women, that are a part of some religious cult, right? Like some, some faction of the Hindu religion, just like all these weird, there's these weird things that people do without ever thinking about them, right? There was a festival of lights called Diwali in India, and it lasts about a week, and you will hear people lighting off fireworks until 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning sometimes, with no real fucking purpose. And one time my family and I were walking home from the ashram, and there was a woman, she lit fireworks in the middle of the road, just firecrackers. Now, this is supposed to be a festival of light, so these aren't like, the really cool fireworks are the ones that professionals do. I always joke around like, people, you live in a certain part of the country, and people start lighting fireworks off the 1st of July, June 30th, the 3rd of July. They can't wait till the 4th of July to blow their thumbs off, right? And, there's those, the ones that you see professionally, your city does, or, that they're done, professionally, these fireworks that light up the sky, and, everyone goes to see those. But then there's the ones that just make noise. I was telling my wife this story like a week or 2 ago. So when I was a little kid, we went through this place called South of the Border in South Carolina, driving down from Connecticut to Florida. And it is this big, giant guy named Pedro. It's pretty much, the guy who owns it is not Hispanic, right? But there's this Pedro, and Pedro is this big, gaudy statue with lights on him. And they put in the new 95 highway, so this is years and years ago. 95 is the big highway that's used now. And sometime in my childhood, they put the highway in, it wasn't there before, like this interstate highway. And Pedro, this guy who owns South of the Border, got the the government to bend the highway over so he would be still, this sort of like, they have these big Buc-ee's. I don't know if those things are nationwide, but these big giant gas stations. But this was even more gaudy, right? And they sold fireworks and just, I mean, the toilets, like you had to pay money to use them. Like, it was a very greasy thing. And they had signs from 100 miles out. They had these big billboards. And they had, there'd be 50, 60 billboards. And you'd read them as kids, as my family. So we drove down. It was like a big deal. And then we stopped there. But it was just kind of a disgusting place. And, my parents weren't big into fireworks, but my dad bought me a couple of things. And one of these things looked like a little Tootsie Roll. It was, about 2 inches. It sort of looks like it had wax at the end of it. And it was kind of like a mini rocket, right? And it, the gunpowder would burn out the back and it would change colors. And I don't know if we lit one off as a family, but I had one in my room. Yeah, I'm a little kid, like 10 years old, right? And I found it one day and I just just because it was there and I was like, all right, I'll just set this thing off. So I put it on the windowsill of my window of my room and I lit it and it somehow didn't clear the window. Like it just didn't fly straight. And it bounced back into the room and it shot around the room, banging off the walls, changing fucking colors. It was on fire. And, whizzing by my head a couple times like a fucking bullet in a submarine, and then landed on a blanket, which I had to quickly put out. The blanket had a big hole in it. I didn't tell my parents this. There's this burnt blanket in my room. So there's this kind of thing, right? So my kids and I are walking by this house, and this woman was running like an old woman. She's like, like a thump and drag, like she can't, she's walking with like a limp and dragging her fucking leg because she's like 90 years old. And she just lit these fireworks and then walked into her house. And we walked around the corner, and we were about 15 feet away when they went off. We had no idea, like, because you really couldn't see the fuse. It was, dark out, it was like, there's some street lights. This is kind of a nicer neighborhood in India, too. And she just lit them off, like, irresponsibly. And, like, why are you doing that? Like, are you, why would a 90-year-old woman want to do something like that? It's not like it's supposed to be a festival of light. You're celebrating, divine light. It's not a noise fireworks celebration. And so there are cows that just wander the street, animals, stray dogs. And cows often will like put the fireworks in their mouth. They eat a lot of garbage and shit. They'll eat a lot of paper. They walk around the streets, they eat garbage and paper. And they'll someone will light a firework like that, and the cow will come up and get its mandible blown off, right? Like, and they worship cows. I mean, the cows are sacred in the country. And so there's weird shit that people do, and they never question it, right? And there's weird shit in religions like I've talked about for Christianity, the weird obsession, that this thing that they call God in the Old Testament has a real obsession with foreskins, right, and circumcision. And so people just take it for granted, and they just, because you grow up with it, you think it's normal. And so you're supposed to ask questions about these things. When you become, when you come online, right, when you wake up and you start seeing that there's a lot of fucked up things in your society, you start, asking questions. And one of these good questions is, why would you be okay with Jesus dying for your sins? And these Christians are losing their fucking minds. Now I'm starting to get people showing up. And again, it's not all Christians. I'm sure there's some that just say, all right, that's, Paul being Paul. But I think everyone should ask that question. Like, why would you think that's a good deal? Because it's a made-up bullshit thing. It's not real. And so I have a few comments here. One person writes, if Jesus isn't God, the Bible is a lie. This guy will lead you astray. It's obvious he doesn't do much research. Jesus was a normal human being that evolved spiritually. And that is really the really good news for all of us. Like, there's lots of people who, they're people with some spiritual talent, and they come down and, they have a divine purpose, but they have to, they have to step into it and evolve. It's not a guarantee that they're going to do that. And Jesus did that. Like, he's, certainly not God. You can see, like, there was immaturity, some of the things he said, some of the things he did. I mean, when the Bible is certainly not, the Word of God, because it's not even written by Jesus. Even a book written by Jesus wouldn't be the Word of God. And so, like, that's just made up bullshit, right? It's a sell job that they did to, indoctrinate people. You're being indoctrinated. So, Jesus was great. Like, he was, a spiritual person, but that's, and that's more than enough. But, for people to, when you have this indoctrination is something else. But here was the comment I really want to get to, because it's really long. I didn't read all of it. I read the beginning and the end, but I'm going to read all of it now. So this is to Trump's demon creed: deny, deflect, attack, lie, and always claim victory. I really enjoy your take on politics. Now, I've never seen this person before, right? Now, if somebody comments regularly, or I don't know what else, there's like a couple of marks next to their names that lets me know that this is a normal viewer. But I read the comments every day, so I start recognizing people who comment frequently. But this person's never commented. I really enjoy your take on politics, but I have stood your ridiculous opinions on Christianity long enough. It's your channel, and that's where you should stop, because it is my channel. Like, I get to have my opinions on my fucking channel, and my takes on things, and it's not for you. Like, I'm not trying to. I want to make this clear. I'm not trying to get people to deconvert from Christianity, and I'm certainly not trying to get Christians to try my meditation. Like, I don't. I tell people about it, and those are people who it's meant for. Is you almost have to be chosen to do the meditation that I do. It's got to be part of your path. For people who, have some connection. And even then, it's not guaranteed, because it takes work, and it's not, it's not popular. It's a fringe thing. And so, like, and I certainly am not trying to force anybody and encourage them to quit their religion, but just question things. And, not even that. Like, it's something that came across my mind, and I thought I would share it with people. Like, I don't have an agenda with me saying it, right? And so, like, I don't care what you do with it, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. Like, I just don't want to hear about it, because I don't care about it, right? And it's your thing. And if you're fine with it, if you're fine with what your thing is, if you believe in your thing, then me saying these things shouldn't get you to, people say shit to me all the time, and it doesn't keep me from doing what I'm doing in terms of the meditation. People call it demonic. I've got so many comments of Christians saying what I do is demonic, and they know zero about it. They haven't read the books or tried the practice, but they just, it's demonic, right? And, because they're retarded. But, to say something like that, right? And I'm not going to quit my thing because you say, oh, it is? Well, I better quit. So it's like, if you have faith in what you're doing, then me saying this should be nothing. It should have been like water rolling off a turtle's back. It's your channel, and it's supposedly a free country. So if you want to drone on endlessly about your own goofy Eastern religion, more power to you. So you want to call it a goofy Eastern religion. Well, it's not goofy, and it's not a religion. And so, for somebody, if you ever talk to a Christian about, talk about droning on, I share something that you don't know about, and it's really great for those people who do it. And there's lots of people who've tried it and benefited from it here. And so, but you don't know anything about it, and you're ragging on it. So, and again, I'm not saying anything about Jesus. Like, I'm not saying anything derogatory. He's not the only Son of God, because that's just not true. But I say he's a spiritual person that achieved a spiritual goal, which to me is great, because he's one in in 100 million. Like, it's a small number of people who achieved something like Jesus achieved, right? So, I celebrate those things. Every religion, I mean, especially the older religions, the older it gets, the more people make up bullshit, the more it gets distorted. You ever play that game, phone tap, phone call, phone, whatever it is? Where you say something, you whisper in somebody's ear, and they whisper in somebody else's ear. And by the time it makes it around the circle, it's been distorted. So, anyways, let me find this thing again. If you're endlessly about your own Eastern religion, more power to you. I've always tried to tolerate it without comment in an effort to learn your views on the political events of the day. So you realize that I have something going on politically, and I am much more adept about talking about spirituality than I am about politics. Spirituality is my passion in life. I mean, it's one of the major passions. I don't give a shit about politics, and I've invested a lot more energy and time in the practice of meditation, and I know a lot about these things compared to most people. And and that's a legitimate question I ask, but it's just your butt hurt, right? Your butt hurt because deep down I'm right, and you're whatever it is. To learn your views on the political events of the day. But to come here every day and shit on Christians and Christianity in an effort to justify your own religious belief is a bridge too far. None of those things are true. I get comments from Christians all the time that are offensive. Like I said, they've called my thing demonic, and they just would post inappropriate Bible quotes that had nothing to do with the content and all these other things, right? But aside from that, I had a dream in it which I walked up to Jesus, and in my Sajmark tradition, if I consider Jesus a spiritual master or a saint, and if you have a dream with one of those people in it, it's them. That's because they try to communicate with you, and so this, in my belief, that this was legitimately Jesus' soul, and I went up to him and I said, is it okay if I talk about Christianity on my YouTube channel because Christians watch my videos? And he said, there's more to it, but I've talked about this a lot. This is the first time I've talked about this. And he said to me, I mean, there's more to the backstory, but this is the entire interaction in my dream. And he said, yeah, why do you think I'm sending them to you? So he was saying he's sending Christians to me to hear about, the truth about his religion. That the bullshit religion that's there, and so I believe that 100% correct because I know it is. I know that what I'm saying is much closer to the truth than what you're told by your Christian indoctrination. It's the truth that Jesus wants you to hear, right? Because Jesus wanted everyone to practice spirituality, and he didn't want people to worship him, and he didn't want this religion to come up. He was against this kind of power and structure, like any spiritual person would be. So anyways, so that's why I do it, and because it's my channel and I get to talk about what I want to do, whatever comes to me. I mean, I talk about things like this across the board. Whether it's politics or Hollywood or whatever, I give my take on things, my what I see. In an effort to justify your own religious belief is a bridge too far. If you are so confident that you have found the way, you should never need to disparage others' beliefs. I'm not disparaging your beliefs, right? I'm telling you, you're being fucking lied to, right? That you're believing something. And again, I'm not even talking about this to Christians. This just popped in my mind. This isn't, I mean, in a sense, the spiritual stuff here isn't for Christians. I mean, there was a reverend, a guy who was a minister, who wrote me long comments, and he, and I wasn't even talking about this. I mean, it was more maybe mild back then. But he knew everything I was saying is true, and he was struggling, with his religion. And he felt like he was lying to his parishioners, and he saw the corruption in his, in the religion, his church. And he was coming here, listening to my videos. They knew that what I was saying is true, and he was having, a struggle with it, right? If you are so confident that you have found the way, you should never need to disparage others' beliefs. You mean call it a goofy Eastern religion, right? Now, it's none of those things are true. And I've talked about the guy Dodgy wrecking my thing. Like, I had to come to terms with my spiritual organization being corrupted. And, it was a much more personal because I knew the people fucking doing it. Like, I had relationships with them, right? I knew, we know each other. And so this was, a much harder thing than you guys have to deal with, a 2,000-year-old religion. You constantly misinterpret Christianity, especially the part where Christians need to take no responsibility for their actions because Christ died on the cross for us, which was a gift from God. Well, why is it a gift from God if you're going to take responsibility for your sins, right? Right? Like that's, and I mean that's what the words say. Like I read all the or many of the quotes from the Bible that have to do with that, right? Like you don't earn heaven in Christianity. You're not earning heaven. You just accept somebody, and that's a very vague. I mean, like there's lots of people that promise and make marriage vows, right? How many people uphold those marriage vows? Well, all the people that got divorced did, right? I mean, you take these vows and and it doesn't work out. So I mean, why even take vows? And people can say that Jesus is their Lord and Savior, but that doesn't words mean nothing, right? And so it's a very vague. It doesn't, it's not real. Like it's just a bullshit thing. You constantly misinterpret Christianity, especially the part where Christians need to take no responsibility for their actions because Christ died on the cross for us, which is a gift from God, not the answer to a request from humans to avoid accountability. No, it's said that you can't take accountability, that you're born a sinner piece of shit that can't take accountability, that you can't possibly take accountability for your sins. Only Jesus can do that, which is a complete lie. I mean, if you think about it, that makes no sense. Somebody can't die in the past for your sins, right? And so you have to take responsibility. And, maybe some Christians do, but that's not what your book says, and that's not what, your dogma says. Your dogma says you can't. You're born a sinner. You're incapable of doing that. Like, I'm not making that shit up. Like, I was a fucking Catholic. I read the Bible. I heard the talks. I get comments all the time from people. You think that if you accept Jesus, your Lord and Savior, you're going to heaven despite what a piece of shit sinner you are. And if somebody does that on their deathbed, they're going to heaven. That's what, And like Erica Kirk thinks her husband's in heaven, even though he was promoting a genocide in Israel, in Gaza. Anyways, to avoid accountability, Christianity is quite serious about self-responsibility. Simply because Christ died for our sins is far from a guarantee of eternal life for... I got to switch over to a second. Died for our eternal life. Make this here. Died for our eternal life for a Christian. This is completely dependent on decisions we make here on earth as individuals, taking responsibility for ourselves, our thoughts, our words, our deeds. None of that stuff's true. There's no system in your religion for that. There's, I used to go to confession, and when I was a kid, and I had mononucleosis. I had a bad case of mono. I missed 3 months of school, and like basically the whole year of catechism. So in the year that I missed, we learned how to say the Hail Mary. There's 2 prayers that you say, Our Fathers and Hail Marys, right? And so when I went into confession, like if you think about a 12-step program where there's a part where you have to take accountability for all the people that you've hurt, like all those things, right? You have to go through these different steps. In Catholicism, you would confess your sins, and they would say to you, okay, say 3 Our Fathers or 3 Hail Marys. You're saying prayers that have nothing to do with taking responsibility. You could have murdered somebody, and and they give you these prayers, right? And so the guy tells me to say 5 Hail Marys. And I go to the pew, and like one of my friends is there, and I'm like, I got to say 5 Hail Marys, and I don't know the prayer. And my friend goes, well, I have 3 Our Fathers, and, and Our Father's a longer prayer. I'd rather do 5 Hail Marys, so let's switch. So he said my 5 Hail Marys, and I said his 3 Our Fathers, because it's just a bullshit thing, right? Like that's, there's nothing there for you to take accountability, to take a real accountability. And so, you can't excuse what's being said here. Like you can, bullshit yourself, right? Christians die for our sins is far from a guarantee of eternal life. That's completely dependent on decisions we make here on earth as individuals, taking responsibility for ourselves, our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Get off your high horse, for fuck's sake. Well, you just swore, bro. I broke this Christian, he swear. For fuck's sake. You are far from the arbiter of what's right and wrong for anyone other than yourself. I totally agree with that. Like, I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying you believe a bullshit thing. And I just asked a question. Why do these people think it's okay for Jesus to die for their sins? Instead of taking responsibility for that, you're lashing out at me. So, but yeah, I'm not, I'm not responsible for you, and I'm not saying any of those things because I don't care. Like, it's not my thing. You are far from the arbiter of what's right and wrong for anyone other than yourself. P.S. You are a neurotic hypochondriac. Like, how many videos have you listened to? Dude, you've been stalking this channel for a long time. You're losing your shit, and you have a horrible ability to assess somebody else's bullshit. Like, you could find real flaws in my character. Like, you could say, like, I'm an asshole or whatever it is. But my mom was a hypochondriac, and she, had me go to an allergist. I've talked about this, right? And so because of that, I never go to doctors. I had 3 severe cases of COVID. I'm 60 years old. I've never had anything. I haven't had cancer. I haven't anything severe. But I get migraine headaches, which suck, and there's possible explanation from that. A head injury, getting a concussion when I was a kid. I started getting it after that. Who knows what else? My dad also, it runs in my family too, so there's that. And then I've had other sort of niggling, difficult little things. But I don't go to the doctor, right? I've had no real, I haven't broken any bones, any of these kind of things. And when my heartbeat went up to 250 beats a minute, I didn't go to the doctor because, I just don't trust allopathic medicine. And if I'm going to die, I'm going to die at home. I'm not going to, I wasn't going to go get hooked up to one of those respirators. My wife and I were both struggling breathing pretty bad when we had COVID. That's not, me being neurotic or a hypochondriac. You're just making shit up, right? I share whatever health things are going on, but I am a relatively healthy person. I walk, 5 miles a day and do farm work every day. Even with a migraine headache, I, do things or whatever. Like I push through despite suffering, and I just have learned to ignore those things for the most part. I'm saying this because, like, that's the opposite is true, right? Like, I saw my mom as a hypochondriac and someone obsessed with her health, and I have to be really sick before I go to the doctor. Like, after the COVID, I just wasn't getting better, and my wife found this place I go to, but even then, it's hard for me to. I mean, we went in the beginning, and we got tests and blood tests and things like this, and but after a while, it's hard for me to go there. Like, I just. I do certain things every day to stay healthy, and I incorporate more and more things as I get older, which sucks, but it's just a hassle. So, like, you suck at it, right? And, like, there's real things you could find to criticize about me. There's real things, but it's not me being wrong. Like, it's, it's not, being wrong isn't one of them. You are a neurotic hypochondriac. We all have problems and do not find your every heart rate update to be that much of interest. This is like when someone is thinking there's a relationship there when there isn't. Like, you don't have to listen to any of the videos. Like, these are for people that are interested in, what I do here, and some of the people are interested in me personally. They like when I share personal stories, and, the heart rate thing was significant. Like, when my heart went up to 250 beats a minute, I haven't talked about it recently because it hasn't happened. Like, I've got it under control. Seems like it was a, sort of a thing that was happened for 2 weeks, but it was, a significant thing in my life, right? Like, it was, I thought I was going to die. I mean, my heart was racing so badly. And the majority of people would have just raced to the emergency room, which I didn't do, like, because I'm not a neurotic hypochondriac. And I'm not also a butthole little cunt that wants to laundry list me. Like, this is great. Like, every little thing that the person can think of. There's a lot of resentment for something that, I didn't say anything that would, you're taking this personally, right? Like, I don't know who you are, I don't, whatever it is, right? Where am I here? Do not find every heart rate update to be of that much interest. I find your need to share these intimate details of your private life to everyone on the internet to be quite feminine. This whole time I'm thinking to myself, this guy's a real bitch, right? Like, this guy's a little bitch for the way that he's reacting to this. But for him to call me feminine, is this you, Blake Neff? Right? Is this is this Blake Neff? Blake, is that you? Is this one of the twinks? I think this is one of the twinks, or somebody who is upset about the twinks being called twinks. Stop dwelling on yourself for 5 minutes and you will find life to be happier. Yes, I've unsubscribed and I hope soon to stop seeing your channel show up on my recommendations. Like, there's nothing more cunty than saying you're unsubscribing. There's a lot of cunty things out there. But the arrogance of the thing, and I've said this over and over again, is that you think that your viewing of my videos is an honor. Like, I should be honored that you're watching my videos. This is the whole tone of this message, is that this guy's coming in with, like, he matters and you don't matter to me. So in terms of my relationship, like, there's people who just want to be seen and heard, right? They just want people to watch their stuff and they feel gratitude for people watching their stuff, right? And that's not why I make videos. I don't know why I started doing it. Partly because it was there was monetary incentive and, other things and whatever. But, there's information that I thought was valuable. The most important part would be the spiritual practice and people connecting to divinity within them, which I believe is the solution to, that the Sajmark system is the solution to the problem of humanity. And it legitimately helps people's change. And all these bullshit religions that exist now have failed. And, when Jesus was alive, it was dynamic and it was a spiritual practice. And he had a method, he meditated and he had a method and, whatever. He didn't leave a method for his disciples, but he had a way that he connected to God. And that was either edited out or whatever. It just, they dumbed it down. Whatever they did to make the religion successful. If Jesus in his best teachings were the ones they focused on, then Christianity wouldn't exist. They had to dumb it down. Like, all these religions are dumbed down so that, billions of people would do it. If billions of people are doing it, it's not a very good religion. Because it's, people are remedial in their spiritual practice, so they can't do something more sophisticated and more dynamic, and they can practice a religion but not spirituality, right? But going back to my point, I believe what I have to say here has value. And if it doesn't, I don't want mercy views. I don't want, like, pity views, right? I don't want people viewing this thing because they pity me and they're humoring me like, some fucking senile fuck or some, Alzheimer's having, crazy person that you're humoring the person, right? Because you feel sorry for them and they're, whatever. You want them to calm the fuck down or whatever it is. Like, the reason that that people would view these videos for me is that, there's something you're getting out of them. And if you're not getting anything out of it, then I would want you to not watch it, right? If they're upsetting you and make you feel worse, that's not the goal. I'm not trying to upset people. Just go somewhere else, right? There's plenty of Christian channels. Why are you listening to me talk about politics? There's not enough Christian people out there talking about politics. Why am I so much better than those people? Why have you watched so many of my videos if there's not something going on with me that makes my perception of politics dynamic? And I don't give a shit about politics at all. Like, I would rather do celebrity videos at this point than politics. It's just that I wouldn't call Trump politics. Like, Trump's a demon having a meltdown. But in all that, there's plenty of Christian channels and Christian commenters, and yet you're coming to listen to my shit, right? Why? Like, you already said that I had value. It's not like you're throwing me a bone by you viewing my videos. Like, you're so important. You're such an important fucking person that I should value your subscription to my channel. I should be honored. Oh, great one. Thank you for watching my videos, you great and incredible person. Like, the arrogance behind I'm unsubscribing. I've talked about this before. When you say I'm unsubscribing, the arrogance behind it, right? And it's clear this person's unraveling, and I hope that they're gone. Like, but they're probably not. Like, people say this stuff. But they know there's something going on here. That there's value here. And it's not because of me. It's because I do this meditation. And it's helped me do my job really well. This is my job. This is my, gift. This is what I can contribute to humanity. Like, amongst a few other things. Like, I don't have a lot of, I can do a lot of things okay. Like, I'm not special and, I'm an okay, farmer. Like, I do an okay job cutting the lawn and making dinner. I'm an okay cook, I say a good cook, maybe. There's some things I'm good at, some things I'm okay at. I'm a functional person. But this is, something I can do that's, I don't know. I'm better at it than lots of people, and I have unique information here because of the meditation that I do and the years of spiritual practice. And that I've, gained knowledge from, it's more than just knowledge, it's a spiritual condition. I've meditated 20,000 hours. There's an outcome. It's changed me, right? And not everybody's going to see it, because here's this other comment that goes with this. This person says, LOL, this guy still takes like 1,000 years to begin the topic of the video, then keeps going on off topic, rambling and nothing. Man, just stick to the title of your video till the very damn end. Trump's demon creed: deny, deflect, attack, lie, and always claim victory. This person doesn't understand what I'm saying, because my video was like 2 hours long, and I don't talk about the creed until I think midway through it. Like, I don't know 100%, but I think it's like midway through it, I start talking about the creed, right? Because, my videos aren't going to be one subject. Like, the title is not going to say all the things that are in the videos. For example, I talk about this stuff, and this person's probably also butthurt about me talking about the Bible stuff. And they don't want to say that because, they don't want to appear butthurt. I don't know. It's a very vague comment. But, the whole video has information in it, and it's not, rambling. It's actually, I have points. Like, there's points. You could call it rambling, but that's what all these things are. I make a 2-hour video. Of course, people are going to think it's rambling. It's not my fault you have a low attention span and, you're incapable of understanding what I'm saying, right? There's lots of content for dumb fucks. There's very limited content for people who have the ability to aspire to be spiritual people and change their consciousness. There's very little content for people who are fed up and want to change something internally. Most of the content is just people pandering to their audience and saying, like, bumper sticker dumb fuck shit for people who don't have the capacity for abstract thought. Think about all the dumb shit that's out there on the internet. Like, all the stuff that's for people who are remedial in their ability to understand stuff. And so, this channel isn't for everybody. It's not for dumb fucks, right? And so, again, but I think it has value to other people, and people say that it has value. And so if it doesn't, it doesn't. Like I mean, it's not going to hurt my feelings when you don't understand it or don't like it or don't agree with it. I'm not trying to appeal to the common, the prevailing consciousness out there. Like I say things that are different than other people. I have a different way of seeing the world, being dyslexic and these other things. And the meditation, it's a whole different perspective. And so, this isn't for you. There's no reason to be butthurt. Just go find, if you're too weak to hear things that go against your belief system, then this channel isn't for you. Like if you're too weak of a person to hear stuff like that, it's not for you. Like I'm not saying this for people who can find, people who agree with them all over the internet. You can find Christian channels with Christian people. That's not what this is, right? And for years, Christians have come to my channel. Again, I'm not hammering all Christians. I've got lots of great Christians that have been wonderful viewers and, have left positive comments. And and there's Christians out there who have helped me, Christian channels, homesteading channels and things. And, my kids' homeschooling without Christians and the Christian community, homeschooling community, you really can't homeschool your kids. Like most of this stuff comes from Christians, right? And so like I'm not against Christians or Christianity, but there are lots of people that come here and try to, run their bullshit on my channel, which I don't do. Like after a while, I just made it a rule. Anybody posting biblical quotes, unless I said something and they're responding to something I said, which then, would be appropriate. But at any other time, I ban people, like people who are proselytizing on my channel. Like this isn't for you. You have plenty of channels. There's 2 billion fucking Christians out there. In America, I mean, the people who do the Gratefullness meditation, it's like 100 people. And, the people who do Saj Marg meditation, it was 200,000, and most of those people were in India. At most there was like 2,000 people in America. So there's almost nobody doing it. And you're not going to hear about it from anybody else on the internet because it's, the organization collapsed and the whole thing with dodgy, right? Anyways, I'm running out of energy here. It's the arrogance, and you think there's a relationship here, then there isn't. There's no relationship. Like you have a relationship with my videos and the things I talk about, right? But if you're sitting there, pissed off because I'm talking about how my heart was racing 250 beats a minute. And, I was also telling people, like, I could die. Like this, when it happened a second time, I'm like, if this doesn't get better, I'm not going to be able to make videos. Who knows what's going to happen, right? Like my heart, like after it happened the third time, I was like, I don't think my heart can take it another time. Like I just, I was a little bit concerned. And if you've had your heart race to 250 beats a minute, it's fucking crazy. Like it's the craziest thing that's ever happened to me in my physical body. And again, I'm grateful that it ended and hopefully it doesn't come back. And also, there are people out there that gave information. Some of the information helped me. Like someone sent me some things for homeopathic remedies, which I don't know if that helped me. I've done a bunch of different things to get it under control. And I think it was caused by the chiropractor putting a machine right by my heart, and it fucked up my whole rhythm of my heart. That whole thing, I've talked about that. But, I don't even know if that's true, but that seems to be the most likely understanding of it. But, I mean, it's something significant, right? If your heart races up to 250 beats, it's something you would talk about to people. But this guy's like really upset about it. And then I said something about his religion. And he's like, yeah, and this too. And you did this. And this. And it also like this. And what about that time you did this? And nobody wants to do that. And by the way, I'm subscribing. So there, you won't have the honor of my greatness viewing your videos. Anyways, all right, let me wrap this thing up here. So it's Monday, May 4th. So I completed this voiceover last night, and I've done a couple since then. And I want to just add one thing about, this whole subject. Been a weird day. Like I've had migraines since I was a freshman in high school. I was a freshman or sophomore year. When I was a freshman, I fell off a zip line. I've talked about that. Woke up in the hospital. I was unconscious. The hospital was probably an hour or so away from the house. So they came and picked me up. I was with my friend and my team. I got my dad behind my house. There's some woods. And they brought me to the hospital. My sister later said that she was upset because I was rude to her. And I don't remember talking to her at all, right? So, I don't remember anything but eating ice chips. I was dying of thirst when I woke up. And, I could have died. Like, that was one of those. They say that you have these points in your life where you can choose an early exit. Sometimes, like, that your life isn't going great or whatever, and your soul chooses whether it's going to continue on or whatever. So that could have been it for me, right? But then a short time after that, I started getting migraines. Also, genetically, it's there in my family. And I got this thing called Denora, and I couldn't see. I was in high school, and I just was like, all of a sudden, one of my eyes, there was just like lights, like, flashing lights in a zipper-like pattern. They call this an aura. And then that went away, and I was thankful for that, and then the pain kicked in. And I was so fucked up, like, I went to the nurse's office, and my mom was going to come pick me up, and, as per usual, she was like, it took like her 2 hours to get, there for a 20-minute drive. And I had no idea what it was. Like, there was a front entrance to the school. And I was, I was a small kid. I was about 5 feet. I was one of the smallest kids in my class. I'm about 6'1" now. My family always grows late. I grew, like, until I was about 20. I was still getting taller. And, that's consistent with the rest of my family members. My brother was 5'6" when he went to Vietnam, and he came back, he was 5'10". He grew 4 inches in Vietnam. So anyways, there was these doors that were propped open, and they were about, 6-7 inches apart, and I put my head, like, in between them, and I was just laying there. I mean, so it would have been social suicide had kids been walking in and out, but there's nobody doing that. But there are people walking by me. I was just laying there, and I couldn't move. I was in so much pain. It was like agony. And I was like, I don't even know what this thing is. And so the aura now I get once every couple of years, where I see the lights, but I don't get the pain. So that's weird. My dad got the aura without the pain. And then, my migraines have sort of progressed. And I don't get them as much. I was getting them quite a bit. Now I'm down to like one every couple of months. But when I do get them, they go away. I used to go to sleep and then they'd go away when I was younger, but the pain was horrible. Like, it just, when it was really, like, it was debilitating. Now the pain's, I can still function and do things. So it's kind of a weird thing. But I had that today where it kept on going. I thought it was over it and then it'd come back. But some of the symptoms, like the pain wasn't so bad, but I get nauseous, and it's just a lack of serotonin. And, there's a condition there that just feels really bad. And so it was just a weird day with a lot of stuff. And it was really nice outside. Then after I made the video, I went out and it was windy and it started to rain, and then it got nice again. And, the migraine came back. Sometimes barometric pressure is a factor. So, like, this has been like a weird period of time, just I think for everybody, and then this thing. But anyways, what I want to say here is, the videos that I make, I'm very clear about, like, Sajmarg was always the missing piece for me to be a functional human being. Like, I could only handle one stressful thing. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't sustain any relationships. I would push people away, my friends and things like that. I couldn't date a girl for a very long time. I didn't have a career. Like, I couldn't function as a person. I was a low-functioning person, right? I mean, I was doing alcohol and drugs, but that was really not the problem. Because when I stopped doing those things, it didn't get better. I was just a real underachiever because I have talents and I was smart and I had, abilities, but I was just really low functioning. And the meditation filled all those gaps. Like, it helped me be patient. It helped me be tolerant. It helped me sustain things, just on every level. it's helped me. And if I didn't ever find Saj Marg or it didn't find me, these videos would be worthless. Like, no one would want to listen to me because I'd have nothing worth saying. My perception, my consciousness, all these things have been enhanced. The insightful things that I say here, it's validation of the Saj Marg system. Like, people could criticize me for being this or that, the other thing. But I'm like, well, I was a fucking underachieving loser before I did Saj Marg. Like, people could say, well, you're an asshole, so that that's a bad reflection on your system. Well, you should have seen me before, right? Like, so, I've changed for the better. And, one of the things about the Saj Marg system is, like, there are things that you do. I read Maxim 10, maybe in one of these voiceovers, so I won't do it again. The one that at bedtime you repent for the wrongs committed, vowing not to do repetition of the same, right? And so you beg God for forgiveness for anything you've done during the day, and you vow that you won't make that mistake again. And so that's like being conscious of your problem. Like, there's various ways when you have something to change. Maybe it's an addiction, maybe it's your anger. You have some issue, something you want to get rid of, right? And you get hyper conscious of it, and you try to control it, and you learn psychological strategies, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You develop character qualities you work real hard at, and that's all great. And that's kind of a little bit a part of Saj Marg. But the great thing about Saj Marg, the meditation, Gratefulness meditation, is that things just disappear. Like, things that you're like, hey, I don't do that anymore. I don't, you just start being able to sustain things. Like, I went from someone who was very low functioning to number one, working at a treatment center with sex offenders, 2 different ones, in a job that the average person lasts 9 months, and I lasted basically 2 years at each of those jobs, or a little bit more in the second one, like almost 3 years in these jobs, right? At the same time, when I did the second job, and I had a master's in counseling, and I was a clinician, I was living with an ex-wife who was, at the time, she'd have psychological breakdowns. And I've discussed these in depth, which was, extraordinarily difficult to live with. There was 6 of us, it was like 4 of my kids and 2 that she had from a previous marriage. We lived in a cockroach-infested apartment. Like, I picked up we had a futon laying on the ground, like the kids were sleeping, 2 of them were sleeping in this like bed, the 2 of the like little kids. And I picked it up, and there was 1,000 cockroaches underneath it. When we were going to move, I took this dining room table and I took it apart, and I knew there was cockroaches in it, and I brought it into the shower, and I was just washing it, the cockroaches down the drain, and there's like 200 of them, like, just, they were everywhere. We had tens of thousands of cockroaches. We lived above a laundry room, and there was, my ex was crazy and low functioning. It was when she really started to kind of come apart. I mean, she always had issues, but this is, it just kept on getting worse over the years. And then, the kids were, toddlers, and, it was a tough time, right? I was working a fucking really stressful job, place that was completely corrupt and abusive with, the worst population ever, teenage sex offenders. Like, sex offenders are the worst people in prison. Like, they're the lowest of the low, and working that job and, coming home to that situation, and, it was just a nightmare. So, you contrast that before I did Saj Marg, when I could barely do anything. I could barely keep a job, and I could barely tolerate a relationship, and I was able to be in this very stressful marriage for 18 years and just all of it, right? Things that I was able to, be able to, tolerate, like, because of the system. It enhanced my ability to do these things. And it, helps me, in this job. I always wanted to, always like being in this zone. Like, there's times that I would be like a comedian with my friends and whatever. I'd just be in a certain mood, and I'd just be, making everybody crack up. And, but it wasn't all the time. Like, it was just, like, so, it would just be like I'd be in the right mood. There's days when I played sports, basketball, I'd be on, a high level, leagues that we played in, or, pickup games in places where there's high-level basketball. And some days I'd be the best guy in the court. Some days I just sucked. Like it was, I'd be in what's called the zone. But when I pick up the microphone every day here, I immediately just am in the zone. Like it just happens naturally, right? Because the Sajmark system is the zone. Like if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, God's just with you and you just get into this flow and there's this thing, right? And then just things, fall into place and you have difficulties because it's part of it. Like I said, misery is just divine blessings, but, everything is, doable and everything, life is kind of just, there's this sense of well-being that you have. And like I was saying before, things just disappear. And, you don't have to concentrate on them. You don't have to work real hard, but you just keep on doing the cleaning. You keep on getting sittings. You keep on meditating. And qualities emerge, good qualities emerge. And other ones are starved and fall off. And things just, you just change for the better, right? It's just, some of it's just doing things that seem unrelated, the meditation, the other things. And it's just a purification system and, something where you develop good habits and qualities and abilities and things like that. My brother was a womanizer. I didn't know he was cheating on his wife till he left his wife on my nephew's birthday. And then he told me he was writing this book it's called The Gift. Because every year since he was like, 18, 19, something like that, 17, whatever, he got laid on his birthday. And like, he would go to bars and just make it happen no matter what it was, right? Like he told me he dated this college girl when he was married to my sister-in-law. He had 3 boys. And they were dating for 2 years. And there's a time where he was up in her dorm room and her roommate was there. And there was someone pulled the fire alarm and he convinced them to stay in the dorm because it was, Central Connecticut State University. I would later go there. It was close to his house. He was a bartender in a bar not far from there. And he picked up this girl. He was in his 30s and she was 18. It's predatory. He was a real addict. I mean, he had a sexual addiction. So, someone with that much of a sexual addiction, I mean, ultimately causing his family to have, his family was never the same, right? After he left his wife, even before that, he had, he had agoraphobia too. So, he had just a tortured soul, like somebody who, really struggled. Like just, you can compare my low functioning, which I talked about in a recent video, maybe this one. It's a different day here. I had to continue this from last night. And I had my heart raced again a little bit. So it wasn't, I was much more relaxed about it. And so, but kind of a bummer. Anyways, let's get back to it. Someone with a lot of issues, someone who is low functioning in one way or another, and the Sajmark system really helped them, right? And when we started Sajmark, well, I remember there's my nephew, my brother's youngest son. I lived with my brother for a couple of years, and I used to go over their house, and we would go play park basketball together. I was in college, and my oldest nephew was 6 years younger than me. He was starting high school, and we would go play park ball. Like you go to these parks, and you have a crew, whatever it is. And my nephew was 6 years younger than me, and my next sibling is my sister, who's 10 years older than me. So these were more like my brothers, my sort of generation, than my 3 sisters and older brother. My older brother was 17 years older than me, right? 3 sisters, in between that. And so, my youngest nephew, Dan, I was his godfather. When my 2 nephews were born, I was just a kid. I, barely don't remember those things, but I remember him being born and, and I, he was just a neat kid, gentle and thoughtful and, someone who I've always wished that he would do the meditation. Like I felt he could. When I told my brother was at Great Barrington. It's like a place out in Massachusetts, close to New York, upper state New York type place with a big lake and famous writers had been there. Herman Melville, the guy who wrote Moby Dick, and I think Thoreau and some of those famous writers had been in this area. And my brother had left his wife for this woman, and his my middle nephew was just, it was on his birthday, and he was just pissed at my brother. And my older nephew was in college, so he would travel with his younger nephew, who was, more forgiving because he's just a better. He was just like, the best, one of the best, my favorite person in my family. He was just, like he was above it, right? And he would hang out with this. My brother dated this crazy blonde woman. I've talked about her, and she was younger, and she had a kid, and the kid was a nightmare. And my nephew had to like take care of him. And my brother told a story where he was going down to Florida with my nephew, maybe to visit my parents, and they were on a train. They took a train down to Florida, and there was like a single mom there, and like a shitty kind of kid, and like same kind of thing. And my nephew kind of made it clear, like he stopped my brother from like banging and hitting on this girl the whole trip, like you were not, like just because my brother just couldn't help himself. He's like a womanizer. It was kind of a neat story because my brother was like, he was telling me it, and he said that my nephew dad he didn't say anything, but just indicated like through like, let's not do this or whatever kind of thing. That it wasn't going to be one of those trips where my brother would be hitting on women the whole time, this kind of thing. I mean, it's a real problem when your kids are like having to do that, right? Like a kid trying to hide the bottle for his parents, right? Like, his alcoholic parents or her alcoholic parents, right? Or my kid's hiding the knives when me and my ex would have a fight because she would get the knives and threaten suicide, right? She would, these kind of things, like, where kids see a real, I mean, the kids have to kind of, step into the adult role, right? And parent their parents. And I thought about that, like my nephew was like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, whatever. And he was restraining my brother from his like sexual addiction. So, like he didn't want to get stuck taking care of some fucking kid from some single mom, this kind of thing. And that's just how, people are with their addictions, right? And when I told my brother about it, my nephew and my brother and I were on a boat and we were fishing. My brother lived on a lake in an apartment complex, and we had a rowboat and we were fishing, and the sun went down. It was like sunset, and there's always like a harmony and balance in the universe, in the world, when the sun sets or the sun rises. That's why when you see a sunset and a sunrise, there's a different energy to it. Like people are sensitive to it. And I told my brother about Saj Marg, and I felt the energy. Like I told him, about the meditation. And my brother ended up doing it, and I always hoped my nephew would too, right? But my brother said he thought I joined a cult. He didn't feel the energy, but he ended up doing it, and he's still doing it to this day. That's it was 1993. I mean, years ago. So my nephew, I haven't talked to my nephew since my daughter committed suicide. So I called my brother up and told him, they didn't really. I think they only met my kids a couple of times. They're all up in Connecticut. My nephew Dan was making video. He was like editing videos or something before I was doing this. Like, so he was already, there's some, whatever it was. And, they called me, my three nephews, and, one of them, the middle one, listens to my show, was listening to my show once in a while. And I don't know how much, but he did listen to it. And he had interacted with my basketball buddy who calls me occasionally. Yeah, that's like a past life, right? I don't interact with many people from it. But, they called me, and I hadn't talked to them in some years. And, it's but someone who I felt had spiritual tendencies and hoped it would do the meditation. But, with my brother being the way he was and whatever it was, I don't know. The following year, my brother and I went to the ashram. We met the, Master Charji, and my brother met this French woman. He was like, he just spent all his time with her, flirting with her, and just this whole thing. And, he ended up becoming the caretaker, and he told me, I've gone numb from the waist down. Like he just didn't have any sexual feelings anymore. Which was part of like, it was a side effect from, he became a preceptor in the system, and, he just couldn't be a womanizer, right? And so like he lost his, his addiction was blocked from him somehow, right? And like this, not the, the only story like that, but I mean, That's one that I know about because I knew my brother's womanizing tendencies, and he just lost. Of course, he was getting a little bit older too, but he said he felt numb from the waist down, like his whole lower center, his lower chakras, all that shit he was like cut off from because he was, kind of a deviant person. Another thing was there was a guy, the Sajmark system, you're not supposed to drink alcohol or use drugs, anything that will affect your ability to meditate. I really can't be around people who are using drugs and alcohol. Like I get like, I feel it. Like I can feel it's kind of weird. Like when I'm in a bar, and then, I used to, use drugs and drink all the time when I was in my 20s, and now, like I can't even be in like places where there's a lot of alcohol. I get a little bit, I don't know what to feel, like almost like vertigo or something. It makes me feel uncomfortable. So it's kind of interesting. But there's this guy, and he was getting drunk, and he came, and these Indians would go, and they would fall on the feet of their gurus and weep and say how bad they've been and please forgive them. And Babaji said, "Oh no, I don't mind you drinking at all." The guy said, "Really?" He goes, "No, you can go drink, but there's only one condition. When you go to drink, you have to sit there and say that that him, Babaji, that I'm taking the drink and not you. You can put it in your mouth and drink it, but just say that I'm the one drinking, not you." And the guy said, "Okay, great. That's like, I'll totally do that." And so the guy went and, he went to whatever they drink in India. They have bars or whatever. And he had this idea that, the idea that, the master was drinking the alcohol, not him. And he took one drink and he threw up, and he got an aversion to alcohol, and he could never drink again, right? And, and these are more, I don't know what to say, more obvious examples or things, but there's many more subtle things that people have, right? And so the system works. And, anybody who listens to my videos, the information, the system, and the books and the philosophy is amazing. Like, it's just, for people who can get it. Like, lots of people can't understand it, and that's fine. But there are people who can. And this guy who left this comment that I read yesterday, he is acknowledging that he wanted to hear my points on political views, but wants to separate those things from my doing the practice, right? Because he's a Christian and he thinks his thing is better and, whatever it is. But he's acknowledging that there's something going on here that that he's not finding on Christian channels. And it's specifically because I do the meditation. And so many people, that's the case. And it's not for everybody, our people, people don't get it right away, or they don't have the capacity for abstract thought or whatever. They're just not ready for it. I don't know. Like, I can't say. There's no way I could look at a person and tell you. Some people just stand out because you can see their spiritual capacity. But, the average person, I can't tell whether they like this or not, and whether they could feel the transmission or not, if they're sensitive enough. Like, it's a whole thing. But, it's a true blessing, right? And, like, it's everything. If people who like this channel, well, it's because of the energy in the meditation. People who feel connection with me, it's because of that, right? It's because there's, I've been elevated to become something better than I would have been if I was left to my own, my own devices, my own limitations. And so, that's there for everybody to see. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Okay, so I was going to do that, but, last night I felt like maybe and I wasn't intentionally trying to do this, but I, wanted to re-listen to this because I thought it would, I wasn't trying to shit on my brother. Like, people have issues, like, my inability to function, right? Like, that's, whatever it is, people have addictions and issues and whatever it is. And the point of the Sajmark system is it helps you. Like, it, helps to alleviate those things in a way that's not, you're not confronting the thing necessarily. It isn't like, in fact, you're trying to, somebody asked me a question about, what about know thyself, and the Sajmark system is forget yourself and remember him. And him is the divine master within, the God, whatever, right? It's, divinity. And so your inevitable divine self. And so if you can forget your ego and remember your divine self, then, when you're connected to God, you raise your level, right? And things disappear. but you don't want to, have that connection, and the transmission in the system makes things stronger. So you don't want to dwell on things, right? If you have a problem, you don't want to be in denial about it, but you don't want to spend all your time thinking about it. You don't think about the problem, you think about the solution, right? What's the solution? Then you focus on that. And the Sajmarg method is, something that started 100 years ago, but it's been around. And, without the method, it's not as, dynamic, but people have been able to connect to God and been ennobled in some way, have been raised to a higher level. The examples of this are over and over again. And so, most people are just struggling and miserable. I mean, there's some really happy people enjoying their material lives, and that's a little bit different. But the people who are just miserable and, life sucks for them, and they're just getting through the day. And this is available to them, I mean, now in the Sajmarg form and Gratefulness meditation. But, it could be available just by you connecting to God. Like I said, the method, the Sajmarg method, is supercharged because of the transmission, the cleaning. And and you can go faster and with more, assistance. But, connecting to God has always been an option for everybody at all times, right? And, religions block that with their bullshit promises and, the indoctrination, they get you scared that if you leave, you're going to, all this stuff, right? Like all these things. And so, I'm not trying to convert people, but I'm saying that this is an option out there for people who can do it. Like, and I don't know who can do it, who can. But, you don't hear that. Like I'm almost like a solitary voice for this thing, especially because of the, Sajmarg system. I mean, there's lots of people that talk about connecting to God internally, but they don't have a method. Or they have a method that's not as efficient. There's lots of talk about this. Every spiritual person, a New Age person might even talk about something like this. But, have you found an effective way to do it, right? Have you found a system that helps you? But, either way, it's always available. And if it's really a matter of wanting it, right? Wanting it to happen. Choosing God. And so there's a comment that came in last night. I was going to save it for my next video. And should I do that? Maybe I should do this. This video is already pretty long, and I'm just needing it to get the thing up. I think I have one more thing to cover, video-wise. I've had the part issue today, and that sucks. It's just, when you think something's gone, and now the problem. I wasn't panicked, and I'm not overly bummed out, and I've lost almost 20 pounds, and just everything seemed to, it just seemed to get better. So, I think there might be one cause that happened this morning, ozone water, and that's the whole thing, that's one of the possible side effects. So I'll see if that caused it, and hopefully it disappears and I don't have any more of those. I'm also trying to look at it like there's some spiritual benefit, which I know there is. So whatever. But it's just like I don't want it to become a normal thing in a way. Every once in a while I have this thing happen. But it's I'm not as freaked out as I was the first time it happened, and the other two, in different ways. Like I knew I could survive it the first time, but the other two times it was like, oh my God, am I going to do this? I just can't do this. Like I don't think I can. My heart can take this. And then it was probably a month or so I haven't had any issues, and now it's back. Whatever. So there's that. All right. Well, let me wrap this one up here, and I'll, read that comment at the beginning of my next video, which will come out on, I believe, Thursday morning. And, yeah, and please, no comments about, like, there's no, I'm whatever it is that I go through health-wise. People, one of the things about having this be a support system, I've gotten a lot of information from people, like helpful stuff. And I can't read it all, and sometimes people write long comments, and I can't read it, or have trouble understanding it, and I can get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff, but I've found helpful things. There's things that my viewers have suggested that help me, and it also helps other people that have maybe a similar issue. Like everyone has to figure things out. If you're not trusting in the allopathic model, which I don't, and I'm not telling people not to, because each person has to have their, it's like you have to find your things, right? You have to find what diet works best for you. What spiritual system works best for you. You have to find, your significant others. You got to find your people. You got to find your line of work, what you contribute, and your healthcare system, and what works best for you. And the allopathic medicine just doesn't work for me. So, and many other people here that don't necessarily trust it. So sometimes people share information for me and it doesn't help me, but I don't, it doesn't resonate with me, but somebody else. So that's, part of the reason for this whole, talking about these things. But anyways, people can pray, that would be the best thing. If you're concerned or whatever, you don't have to say anything, because it's not, I'll be already over it by the time this video's up. Like, I should be, it should be something that I'm not concerned about. And I forget about the videos once they go up. Oftentimes I'll say I have a migraine or something. People say, oh, feel, they'll express something. And by the time I read the comment, it might be 2 days later, and it's a distant thing for me. Anyways, so that's it for now. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Baramano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.